justice.
Welcome to Payne in Politics. It's good to have you back with us again. I am joined today by two district judges in Jefferson County. We have with us Judge West as well as Judge Templeton. As you know, this is not an opportunity for us to endorse any particular candidate nor any particular party, but an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the elected officials and selected people in Jefferson County. So first of all, I want to welcome you. I appreciate you guys being here, and if you could, let's jump right in and introduce yourselves to the viewers and tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Mitch Templeton. I'm the district judge in what we call a state district court, which is the 172nd District Court here in Jefferson County.
Awesome. Judge West?
Well, I am judge of the 252nd District Court, which is a felony criminal court, and I am now starting my 6th year, so the 2nd year of my 2nd term.
This is an opportunity not necessarily for us to focus on our policies or our positions politically, but this is an opportunity really for the viewers to understand, what does a judge do? And so if you can kind of give us a little bit about where you office, because I don't think people know even where you office.
Okay, great question. And because I did run and was elected just a year ago, I know people don't understand what we do. It's fresh on my mind. But both of our courts are on the 2nd floor of the new courthouse, the State District Courthouse, Jefferson County Courthouse. And it's kind of confusing to people because we're called state district judges. And in fact, most of our overhead, including our salaries, are paid by the state of Texas as opposed to Jefferson County. And as a judge in a state district court, I provide a forum for people's constitutional rights, whether it be in a civil dispute, which is a dispute basically over money, or some other type of relief that they're seeking, or in a felony criminal case, I provide a forum for that person's dispute, for that person's guilt or innocence, whatever it may be, to be determined.
Well, if you could give us, and I'm going to show you what I pulled off the internet, is kind of a flow chart of the court system. And if you can kind of walk through our viewers exactly what the court system is like, and so kind of help us understand that.
So at our courthouse, it starts here at the bottom. You've got the municipal court. At the very bottom, there's not a municipal court in our big courthouse. A lot of people know where that is, though. There's a municipal court downtown, primarily handles your traffic tickets and things like that. It's where you go when you get pulled over and you need to take care of a ticket. Justice courts are your justice of the peace courts, and they are scattered around our county, divided in areas. There are 2 that are at our big courthouse on the 1st floor. When you go upstairs, just like you go up the chart, we kind of go upstairs at the courthouse, and you've got our county courts. We have 3. We have County Court 1, 2, and 3. They also can hear the same types of cases as each other, but they have separated a little bit, where you have County Court 1, which is Judge Edens, here's primarily civil matters, and then you have Judge Holmes and Judge Woods in Courts 2 and 3 that are misdemeanor courts. They can hear everything, but they typically separate it just like we do. Down the hall from that, you've got your district courts that go all the way from myself, Judge Stevens, in the criminal side. You've got the civil courts, and then you've got down at the other end of the courthouse on the 2nd floor our family courts with Judge Shelton and Judge Thorne.
Well, let me stop you there. Let's assume we get a ruling or a decision that you don't like that's in your court. People have the right, whether or not it's in your court, Judge Templeton's court, a right to appeal.
Sure.
And so what's the appeal process as we see this chart?
Well, you go up the chart and you go upstairs, actually.
Okay.
The 3rd floor is our local, the Court of Appeals in the state of Texas are also divided by regions. And the 9th Court of Appeals is local, and they are on the 3rd floor. And any type of ruling that people don't like, whether it's criminal, civil, family, they can then take that up to a higher court and say either lawyers messed up, judges messed up, and then the Court of Appeals will decide whether we did or did not.
When it comes to a judge, what do you think are good characteristics for a judge, whether or not they are a civil judge or a criminal judge? I'll take that from you.
Well, there are a lot of characteristics that can make a good judge. I think even-handed temperament, someone that's not prone to losing their temper, someone that has a judicious temperament. I personally pray for wisdom every day. I mean, it's one thing to be book smart, to know the law, to know the technicalities of the law, but then to apply those technicalities to people, actual flesh and blood people, because the decisions you make are affecting their life. And you're seeking justice, and it's important to want to do the right thing and to seek justice. A good judge, therefore, has intellect to know the law, wisdom to apply the law, and then a sense of fairness so that it's applied equally to everybody.
So you mentioned the law a couple of times. Both of you have law degrees.
Right.
But there are some courts that do not require you to have a law degree and you can still serve as a judge.
That would be your justice of the peace courts.
Okay.
You frequently see people out on the campaign trail, and by the way, and we may talk about this, but we elect our judges at every level in the state of Texas, which is, it's different than in some other states. But justice of the peace courts can be presided over by lawyers, and they frequently are, especially in larger municipalities. But in more rural communities and in our community, you see a lot of people who run for the position who do not have a law degree.
Well, I have the books right behind you guys, which are the criminal codes, the civil procedure, and the rules of evidence. There are pages and pages of rules and procedures that we are, as lawyers and judges, have to abide by, but you don't know those rules verbatim. Is that fair?
That's fair.
So-
I have one of these on my bench. I have one of these in my office. And I keep one at all times in both places. I order 2 every year, and I look at them. I bet I look in my book probably half a dozen times a week, if not more.
Now, I really want to kind of shift to the purpose of the judge. We've talked a little bit about the position. I really want to talk about the purpose of the judge now. Obviously, you handle mostly criminal cases. How do you try to ensure that the jury that you seat is actually an impartial juror? And what does that mean?
Well, what it means, everyone who comes into a court deserves to have a fair day in court. And people use the words fair, and they throw out, whether someone has biases or they have prejudices of a certain kind. And when I am talking during the process of jury selection to the whole panel of jurors, I explain to them, some people don't want to say, I have a bias or I have a prejudice against something, because there's such a negative connotation to that. And so I try to explain it in a way, I use examples that, for instance, everyone has personal experiences that they bring into a courtroom that could potentially make them someone that should not sit on a certain kind of a jury. I always tell people, if it's not a burglary case, to assume the night before they come into court that they went out to dinner, they show up, their house has been ransacked, very personal, irreplaceable things have been stolen. They show up the next morning for jury duty, and it's a burglary of a habitation case. Probably too soon for them to be fair in that type of case. And so when you explain what that means to people, that's what we're trying to get out of them during that process, is what do you walk in with, and can you leave that kind of at the door and judge this case just on what you hear in the courtroom, or is there something in your head that's going to somehow sway you? Whether it's people walk in and have had bad experiences with police officers. People walk in and have had bad experiences with the justice system. People walk in and have had bad experiences on jury duty before that could affect their ability. People who've been on hung juries sometimes, they don't like to do it again. That's a frustrating process. And so I try to give my attorneys as much time as they need to get that information out of those panels so that then they can whittle it down to hopefully the 12 that will be the best fair representation of our community and not have any types of preconceived notions with regard to either that particular case or the law that is going to guide them in that case.
If you can kind of explain to our viewers, what happens when you show up at the courthouse and they're saying, okay, it's time to do voir dire?
Well, it's interesting because the initial question, is really touching on fairness and not having bias built into the system, because you want everybody treated fairly. So The process of voir dire begins when the notices are sent out for jury duty, if you think about it. And I try to tell jurors, your service as a juror didn't begin when you showed up here today. Your service actually began when you got the jury notice, and now, the way Jamie Smith has things set up so well, you actually turn in your demographic information, your personal information over the internet. And so your jury service actually began there. So in terms of fairness in jury selection, it begins by sending out notices to everybody that is in a public database, whether it be driver's licenses or voter registration, without regard to who you are, what you look like, or where you live. It goes out everywhere in the county. So that's the process from the beginning. But then, you're right, you come in and you do allow the parties to have some say or have some sway on what the jury looks like in terms of who's on the jury.
So in all fairness, when the lawyers are selecting or striking or deselecting jurors, to some extent, they are taking some of their personal biases of what are preconceived notions as to whether or not that juror or prospective juror is going to be good or bad for their case.
Right.
Absolutely.
And there have been times, because I know you've practiced for many years, and I know you've been you've seen it as well. There have been times when some of our lawyers will strike a potential juror, particularly because of race.
Absolutely. And you're referencing, we talked about it before, the Batson challenge. There's a famous Supreme Court case called Batson versus Kentucky, which stands for the proposition that you can't select or deselect jurors based on their race. You can't have a race-based decision in terms of your jury strikes. And that's been extended to other protected classes also. But, the bottom line is, in my opinion, after I've tried many, many cases, if an attorney thinks that they can look at someone's skin color and make a decision on whether they should be on a jury or not, they're foolish. They're going to get burned by that.
What happens when you get caught doing it?
So if you get caught, what happens is if someone makes one of the attorneys makes a strike, and the other side believes that strike was solely made because of one of those protected classes or protected people, then they can exercise what's called a Batson challenge, and they bring that up to the court, and then the court has to hold a separate hearing where the side who made that strike has to then give a either racial, whether it was religion or whatever it was, they have got to then explain some reason why they struck them that was not in that protected group of people. And if they can do that, then it survives the challenge. If they cannot, then that person is not allowed to be struck, and they then would end up on the jury.
Again, going back to impartiality and making sure we have a fair jury, it's really important when you get those jury selection cards or notices to come to jury duty, it's important for people to participate.
Absolutely. And I want to make a comment on that. We always bemoan the lack of interest or maybe even the ignorance of fellow citizens with regard to how our system works and the standards that are to be applied. I have been very impressed with the knowledge of the jury pool in Jefferson County on my first year on the bench.
People don't realize the trickle-down effect when we can't work. People talk about people sitting in jail, and not just the fact that they're sitting there with their not having freedom, but there's a cost associated with that. And then you've got a victim's family who's waiting on a day, to have their day in trial. And you have all these moving parts that are ready. And when you get all of those parts together, which is kind of amazing in itself with witnesses to have a trial, and then you don't have a jury, it's very frustrating.
And what I tell jurors, and I've told my family this, at the most basic level, the jury system is the most basic form of self-governance. When a jury, for example, is coming in, let's say that they're sitting in on an underinsured motorist case where they're trying to decide the damages in an automobile accident case, like maybe your firm is trying. That's setting a standard. That's setting a standard for the community. And that's really an important job, and really if you think about it, very powerful form of self-governance. For that case, it's driven by the facts of that case, yes. But as you know, attorneys, insurance companies, the people that follow these things are looking at what the people of this area think about the value of that case.
I want to shift right quickly if we can get to kind of your power. We talked about your position, we talked about your purpose, and I really want to talk a little bit about your power. You guys don't have individual budgets for your courtroom. Is that fair?
No,
Well,
we do.
we do.
Okay.
Every court has their own budget that covers their staff,
Okay.
covers their maintenance, equipment, paper, those types of just supplies and postage. On my side, on the criminal side, we also have budgets set aside for court-appointed attorneys. We have a large budget set aside for mental health issues where we have to have people examined and things like that. That also goes into our budgets as well.
Well, who approves your budget?
The county
The
commissioners.
county commissioners.
Okay, so you guys have to create the same. I've heard this a lot from some of the other people who've we've spoken with. You basically go before the county commissioners and
Yes.
explain your budget, your allocations, make sure we've had expenditures.
Correct.
Do you have any way of generating revenue for your particular courts?
No.
Absolutely not.
And the fees and fines do not come to the courts directly.
Okay, I want to ask you to talk about that because a lot of people believe that when you fine a person or they have a fee, that somehow goes into your court. That's not true.
It's not true.
Okay,
The
what happens then?
fees and fines there are lots of the fees and fines that are state mandated that cover just a plethora of things. For instance, there's reimbursement to the state for drug testing. There's reimbursement. A lot of our fees and fines go back to the state.
One of the things I found where when we talk about power, particularly in your position as judges, I think the greatest power is not necessarily with your budget, but with your ability to deal with the outcome of the case. Because if you see a case and you think the jury got it wrong, they either made a decision that you thought was just not consistent with the evidence, you have the ability to change that. You're not? Well,
Well, in the civil realm, yes, but it less so than in
Right.
recent years. As you know, being a fantastic civil lawyer yourself, you know that a judge up until about 4 years ago, could grant a new trial for the saying was no grounds or coffee grounds. You didn't have to really have a strong rationale. You didn't have to explain why you're granting a new trial. That has changed. Now you have to explain, if you grant a new trial in a case, yes, you do have power over it. You can grant a new trial. You can undo what a jury did, but you have to explain why.
do you get to assess punishment? And is it limited or guided by some concept?
In certain cases, a defendant always has the right to elect in any case if a jury punishes them or the judge. So if you are in an initial phase of a case and they want to enter a plea, for instance, they can choose to enter a plea either open to you or with some parameters, what we call caps. And then your only guidelines really become what the level of the offense is. And so if it's a certain level offense, you have a range of punishment that the statutes give you.
What are some of the things that people think you do that are just wrong?
Okay, that's a great question, but I want to talk about power a little bit more.
Okay, go ahead.
Because people don't realize that judges do this as often as we do. I didn't realize it. One of the most powerful things I find myself doing is not trial related. It's search warrants and tracking devices that law enforcement asks me to approve, and I take it very seriously. There's a national interest in the FISA warrants related to President Trump, and then also the no-knock warrants that resulted in a terrible shootout over in Houston in Harris County have really highlighted this issue. And law enforcement basically comes to you and asks you for a warrant, which is basically permission to go into someone's private property. And I take those very seriously because it's exercising a great deal of power. I don't think people realize how often that's done. I do them almost every day.
Oh, I do several a day.
It's amazing how many are
a lot.
issued.
I want to make sure, because from your standpoint, you believe your strongest power, or one of your strongest powers, is to be able to give police officers the right to go into someone's house unannounced.
House, car, phones, car trackers, blood. For DWI cases, we sign search warrants for blood regularly. It's any type of invasion of, I guess, privacy that you can think of through a search warrant has to be signed and off by a judge, and there are a lot that go through.
We have a system for the blood warrants, which is a tablet system, and we have them at home, and we read the supporting affidavits that law enforcement is providing, because law enforcement has to swear to the facts that support probable cause, to exercise these warrants. And by the way, when I'm in person with them, I swear them in, I place them under oath and make them look me in the eye and swear to me that the facts that they're basing their requests on are true and correct.
Well, I just want to say thank you guys, for both of you, for being here as we try to get a better understanding of what a judge actually does. And so I want to thank you for joining us. Look forward to having you the next time we have our next video presentation on what's going on in Payne and politics. Again, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
And I would invite everyone to come. Courts are open. Come watch.